The pass had two mouths, and the wide one was a liar. Vi took the narrow one in the dock, the way she took it every morning that the household slept and the priests didn't, with the steering blade feathered and her weight low against the hull, listening. The wide mouth lay south of it, generous, calm-faced, deep-looking as a chief's promise, and it had eaten 4 canoes in her lifetime because the calm was the lie. The ebb ran through it sideways over a coral shelf that stood up out of nothing like a hand. The narrow mouth looked like a mistake. It was offset from the swell line, mean as a gutting knife, and it told the truth to anyone who troubled to learn its language. Almost anyone had not. She counted the sets coming in off the black water. 7, and the 7th standing taller, the way the 7th had stood taller since before she was born. And on the shoulder of the 7th, she put the hull through the gap with 2 hand-widths to spare on the coral side. Spray came over the bow, warm as blood. Behind her, the reef closed its mouth on the lagoon again, and ahead of her was the thing she was not allowed to want: open water. The morning stars were doing their slow work above the horizon. The net was gone already, drowned in the west. The paddler's red eye stood 2 fists above the sea, and under it, just rising, came the pair her mother had called the doorposts. Because when they stood up straight from the water together, the door home to Raiva stood open behind you, no matter what the sea had done to your reckoning in the night. Vi brought the bow around until the doorposts sat where they belonged, off the stern quarter, and held the star there, and when it climbed too high to trust, she handed the course to the next one rising under it, and then to the next, the way you handed a sleeping child from arm to arm, without waking it. The lines went over the side at the reef's outer color change, where the bottom fell away from green to a blue with no floor in it, and while they soaked she did the other work, the work that was the actual point. She took her position. Land signs first, the island's black shoulder against the graying east, the height of the peak against her fist at arm's length, then the swell, counted and timed, then the sky's last workable stars, pinned to their houses, and the whole of it held together and said aloud in breath, as one verse of reckoning, date and season and drift, exactly as though she were 900 miles from any land, and her life hung on the sum. It never did, inside the reef's reach. That was not the point either. A craft unpracticed dies in the hands that hold it, her mother had said. You keep the reckoning every day, it doesn't matter, so that it lives in you entire on the one day it does. 6 years of days it hasn't mattered. She kept it anyway, dawn after dawn, a woman maintaining a road no one was allowed to travel, on the argument, unprovable, unkillable, that roads outlive rulings. Nobody had taught her that in words. Words were what they could forbid. It had come to her the way the shape of her own hands had come to her, from her mother, before the sea was closed, on this water, in the dark, with the chant kept down to a breath between the two of them, because a course is a song, Vi of mine, and a song is a road, and they cannot burn a road you keep under your tongue. She did not sing it aloud, 6 years of not allowed, but her breath fell into the meter anyway, and the hull fell into the breath, and for 1 hour, out past the reef with the fishing lines over the side for an alibi, the daughter of no one was exactly what she had been built to be. The lines caught what they caught, 2 rainbow runners and a jack, enough to explain her, and the sky went from black to the gray of old Tapa, and she turned back before the light could name her to anyone standing on the height. Coming home was its own problem with its own arithmetic, the ebb through the narrow mouth now, against her, the 7th set now a thing to be dodged rather than ridden. The past tried her twice. She was rude to it both times, and it let her through the way the reef always let her through, grudging, unglamorous, alive. By full light the sail was struck, unbent, rolled, and lying under the old net in the smallest of her father's fish sheds where nobody went, because rot and spiders and grief went there, and the patched hull was just a poor girl's paddling canoe again. And Vi was walking up the sand with 3 fish on a cord, and her shoulders remembering how to stoop. That was the trick of it, the stooping. You did it with the spine first, and the eyes after. And by the time you passed the first houses, it was all the way down in the hands, and what the village saw go by was not the navigator's daughter, because there was no navigator. Had never been a navigator. There was a name-shaped hole in the recitations where nobody looked. What the village saw was Roimata's stepdaughter, up early, gutting fish, useful and unremarkable, a girl the shape of the work she carried. The stooping carried her through the village waking, past the canoe house where Murama's assistant was already counting hulls against his cords, with the special morning suspicion of a man who has never once found the count wrong and lives in hope, a morning's family date granted, past the chief's compound, where the cook smoke stood up straight as a planted paddle and someone was arguing with a pig, past the houses of the eastern families, whose aunties, hanging the night's nets, wished her good morning by name, her short name, the safe stub, and watched her go with that particular folded-lipped tenderness that the old reserve for the young, they cannot help. They had all known her mother. That was the thing about an island, nobody ever said it, and it stood in every doorway she passed. The oven pit was where she had left it, which is to say, waiting. She raked back the banked coals, fed them, hauled stones, hauled breadfruit, hauled water, singed her forearm on the 3rd stone, in the same place the 2nd stone had singed it the day before, and had the umu breathing smoke before the household woke, which was the whole point. Roimata rose at a chief's hour, and liked to believe the morning assembled itself. "You smell of the sea," said Tepora from the doorway, quietly. Tepora said things quietly, and watched, and it was not worth deciding what she meant by either. Vi wiped her hands. "I smell a fish. The sea wishes it smelled this useful." The younger stepsister looked at her a moment, longer than the joke was worth, and went. Then the day did what the day did. Roimata held her mat inventory in the shade of the big house. 31 fine mats now. The 31st traded out of a Motuiti bride family that should have known better. Each mat lifted, turned to the light. Its border counted, its softness pressed to a cheek that never once softened to match. A woman taking account of armor. Anira sat where the light flattered and worked oil into her hands, which were being kept, the way you kept a blade you meant to sell, her calluses filed and resined smooth again this month, because a chief's son, when the story of Anira's life would come, and he would take her hand, and a hand that testified to labor was a hand that testified against the family. Anira's toilette proceeded beside the mat inventory like a second ceremony, as it did every morning. The oil worked into the cuticles, the pumice kept damp in its shell, and the little pot of boat resin that Vi was sent to warm at the oven. Blood heat, girl, not cooking heat. Are you trying to lame her? So that the amber could be painted thin across the palms and worked smooth before it set. The smell of it rode the morning, clean, sharp, a good working smell in the wrong place. The smell of hulls and paddle looms laid over a girl who was permitted to touch neither. Anira sat through it with her eyes on the middle distance, being maintained. Once, years ago, Vi had asked her, genuinely, stupidly, curious the way you are curious about a reef you'll never sail, whether the resin itched. Anira had looked at her for a long moment, with her mother's arithmetic moving somewhere far back in her eyes, and said, "Everything itches. You get to scratch," and that had been the entire conversation, and the closest thing to truce the two of them had managed in 10 years. "You'll split the bass today," Roimata said, without looking up from the 31st mat. "All of it, the beating too. Poiret's household got 2 lengths whiter than mine at the last presentation, and I won't have it said." "Yes," said Vi, who beat Tapa the way other people held grudges, thoroughly, rhythmically, for hours. The beating log lay under the mother-of-pearl shade of the old Miki, and the work, once her arms had gone through the door of it into the long room where the arms think and the mind is let off its cord, was almost a kindness. Fold, turn, beat. The grooved beater fell and the wet bast spread, fibrous, obedient, whitening. And the sound went out across the water the way that sound went out from every island in the world. The oldest drum there was, women keeping time, with no one and all of each other. From the next bay came the answering knock of some other daughter, at some other log. You could send a whole language that way, if anyone still dared. Her mother had been able to tell whose forearms were beating from 3 bays off. The way she could tell a swell family under storm chop, because it was all one skill in the end, she used to say. Everything the world tells you, it tells you in rhythm, and all you have to be is the kind of quiet that can hear. Vi was the kind of quiet that could hear. It was mid-morning, and the trading canoe from Motuiti had come in through the wide pass, walked in, sensibly, hauled through the shallows at slack, and the beach had assembled itself around the mats and dried fish and shell hooks, and Vi had been sent down with a basket on her hip, when the world decided to show her, in front of everyone, exactly what she was. The trader's wife was a broad, kind-faced woman with a Motuiti accent and no local sense whatever. She was rolling a length of Roy Meta's second-best tapa between her fingers, talking birds and bride prices, and then her eyes came up over the cloth and found Vi's face, and stopped, and opened. Vi knew the look. She had her mother's jaw and her mother's way of standing with her weight already gone to sea, and old traders had long memories. Oh, the woman said, warm, delighted, disastrous. But you're the image of, you must be the daughter of Hinata. The beach flinched. It was not dramatic. That was the thing Vi could never make anyone from elsewhere understand, in the years when she still tried, how small it was, and how total. A dozen conversations did not stop, they thinned. Hands did not freeze, they found things to do slightly away from where they had been. The trader himself put 2 fingers on his wife's wrist, firm as a mooring, and said something about the tide. And down the beach, in the shade of the canoe house, the shore priest Marama, who licensed the lagoon boats, and counted the hulls out and counted them in, and was not a bad man, which made it worse, turned his head with the mild, complete attention of a frigate bird noticing a fish. The name lay on the sand where the woman had dropped its first half, and everyone walked around it. The daughter of this house, said Roymata, arriving the way surf arrives, all smile and no warmth, is Maya Nira. That one is a girl who works for me. You were saying, the white lengths? The trader's wife had gone the color of scraped bast. She had remembered the ruling. She had it now, the whole shape of it. 6 years old and still keeping its edge. The sea is closed. The deep water holds its dead. And the name of the one who led them there is Tapu, unfit for the mouths of the living. She looked at Vi once more. A flick, a grief, an apology with nowhere lawful to land, and looked away, and haggled badly for the rest of the morning, and Vi stood with the basket on her hip, and her face arranged, her thumb moving over the little braid of sennet at her wrist, knot by knot by knot, the way another woman might have told shells on a cord, and counted her own breaths the way she counted wave sets, in sevens, riding out the tall one. The trading wound on through the morning with the name lying under it, like the finger shelf under fair water. The Motuiti man bought bast and sold shell hooks, and a coil of good northern sennet, Roymata, arriving to preside the moment the tapa was in question, extracted a price for the second best lengths that made the trader's wife blink, and the watching aunties fold their lips in professional salute. And twice more Vi felt the Motuiti woman's eyes cross her face and flinch away, and twice more the beach absorbed it, smooth as water closing over a dropped stone. That was the machinery she had grown up inside. It was not cruelty. That was the part outsiders never got right. Half the people on that sand had loved her mother. It was obedience, worn so long it had become a kind of weather, and you cannot argue with weather. You can only learn what it does to every hour of every day, and stoop. Marama came down the beach as the trading closed, in his shore priest's dignity, to bless the exchange and count the motuiti hull out of the lagoon, and paused, one breath, where Vi stood with the last basket. He did not look at her. He looked at the sea, in the direction the trader's wife had not finished pointing, and his honest face performed the small administrative sorrow it performed whenever the ruling required something of him that a younger Marama might have questioned, but 30 minutes international boats. And he said, to the water, "Mind the ovens tonight, the wind will back," and went on. Which was, for Marama, practically sedition, a sentence addressed to her that acknowledged she existed, was weatherwise, and kept fires. She banked it with the rest, because here was the truth of the household of Roy Mata, and of the island of Raiva, and of every island under the 9th star. And she made herself say it, silently, in the plainest words she owned, so that the wanting would not dress itself up as anything nobler than wanting. Her mother had been the greatest navigator of her generation, and had sailed to prove the road home, and the road had taken her, and a priest 8 days' sail away had ruled that the drowning was a verdict, and from that ruling had flowed everything, the way a whole lagoon flows through one pass, the closed sea, the licensed hulls, the star chants turned to contraband, a name that could not be spoken, a genealogy that could not be recited, and a daughter, therefore, since rank is recitation, since you are only ever what can be said aloud over you, a daughter of no one at all, who slept nearest the cook fire, and hauled the stones, and was worked like a borrowed tool by a stepmother who had done the sums precisely. The girl is an asset that must not appreciate. And every morning before the priests woke, the asset went out through the Liar's Pass and appreciated. The trading was done by noon. She was carrying the 4th basket up from the beach when she heard Rongo before she saw him. You always heard Rongo first. He ran the way other people shouted, coming along the hard sand at the tide line, with his new tattoo still shiny with oil, and his arms going like steering paddles in a following sea. Vi, Vi! He arrived in a spray of sand and importance, seized the basket from her hip out of pure reflexive courtesy, and pointed with his chin back and eastward, breath heaving, eyes enormous, and something in her chest leaned hard toward the water before her mind had any reason. What? Sails, said Ronga, off the east point. Matarao sails, the crab claw cut, the big hulls. Vi, I counted. He said the number, and the beach behind them began to turn, one face at a time, the way a field of taro turns under one wind, and Marama the shore priest came out of the canoe house shading his eyes, and Roy Mata rose from her mats, not one sail, which would have been a summons, not 2, which would have been a tax. 9 hulls of Matarao were standing in toward Raiva under the midday sun, and the paramount's pennant streamed long and red from the tallest of them. And Vi stood on the sand of the only island she was permitted, hands stinking of fish, arms flowered with bast, and watched rank itself come over her horizon. She did the arithmetic no one had asked her to do. Wind, tide, the falling water, the hour. Whoever commanded that fleet would raise the reef within 2 hands' time, at mid-ebb, coming in hot with the sun in his eyes. And unless someone aboard knew this water, truly knew it, he was going to take the wide mouth. "Huh," said Vi, to no one at all. The pass had 2 mouths, and the wide one was a liar.